it was all tied together, and there was no real way for you to have a good mastery of what goes on with the body without understanding what goes on with the brain. If you don't eat right and have the appropriate nutrition and nourishment, it doesn't matter what med we give you, you'll never start feeling better because you don't have those building blocks in there. So to me, that was just a really fascinating way to think about, my gosh, all this stuff is so connected. And if you don't have a good grasp on how the mind and body work, you can't treat the heart or the stomach or the lungs without understanding how the brain's influencing that.
The sound of that tractor means it's time for us to go to work. You're listening to the Give Us the Dirt podcast powered by Hoopod Grading Company. My name is Brandon, and I am your host. Welcome to a special series of Give Us the Dirt podcast dedicated to Mental Health Awareness Month. Today we have Dr. Robert Brownlee, an internist at Tryon Medical Partners, joining us in the studio. Originally from Chapel Hill, Dr. Brownlee stayed in his hometown to attend college at UNC Chapel Hill, where he also nurtured a lifelong love of sports, particularly UNC basketball and soccer. He later moved to Charleston, where he lived for 15 years before settling in Charlotte with his wife and 2 boys. As you can imagine, a journey into medicine is not an easy or quick trip. After graduating from UNC, Dr. Brownlee pursued his passion at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, where he completed both his medical degree and a combined internal medicine and psychiatry residency. Since moving to Charlotte in 2016, Dr. Brownlee has been practicing internal medicine with Tryon Medical Partners. Beyond his clinical duties, he is also actively involved in the business side, helping to build and shape the practice. Today, Dr. Brownlee will share his insights and experiences and hope that our listeners will take away the message that mental health is just as important, if not more so, than many other aspects of our physical health. Dr. Brownlee, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
We were just talking before we got started here that you've been a part of a lot of these things, especially during COVID years, but none for the dirt world. This is new.
That's correct. First one for the dirt world and first one in person, because during COVID, everything was so, people didn't like having us face to face. So it's good to finally get back in the studio and talk to people face to face.
Oh, I'm so glad I actually walked in today thinking that we were doing this virtual. It's always, I always rather have somebody here in the studio.
Absolutely.
It's almost easier doing that. So thank you for coming in and being a part of this. What did you think when somebody said, hey, you want to be on the Give Us the Dirt podcast?
Oh, I was super excited.
You're like, what is that?
A little bit, but also very excited.
We're going to have fun. So as we mentioned, this month we're focusing on mental health. And our partners over at Tryon Medical said, you've got to talk to Dr. Brownlee. Over the past few weeks, we've been sharing stories of those who have struggled with their mental health and had the courage to raise their hand and say, I need help. Today, we're going to take a different approach by focusing on the research and the medical side of this very important topic. But before we do that, I want to let's give our listeners a little bit of your background. Tell us about you. Where did you? Now, you grew up in Chapel Hill?
That's correct. Yep.
And went to school in Chapel Hill. You had no desire to leave.
A little bit, but it was hard for me to pass that up. So I stuck around there, and then, yes, after 4 years there and 21 years in town, it was time to go somewhere else. So that's
not a bad place to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Charleston wasn't either. So Chapel Hill and Charleston, 2 great places. I felt very fortunate to be in both of them.
Yeah. I'm always surprised at people that leave Charleston.
I get that a lot. Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I met my wife down there. She's an oncologist. So we both did our training down there, and it's just it was a natural time for us to transition. We had a 5-week-old. We knew we were pregnant when we were looking around, and we're excited to kind of explore some other opportunities, a different season of life, right? So we looked all around, and Charlotte was a great opportunity for us for a lot of different reasons, and we've been real glad we've been here the whole time.
Yeah, so you've been here since 2016?
That's correct, yep.
And you've got 2 kids.
Yeah, I have
2 boys.
7-year-old turns 5 on Friday, just back from a long trip to the Ashboro Zoo yesterday to celebrate his birthday, and then a 5-year-old as well, yeah.
You know what? And we were just talking before we started the podcast about how cool the Ashboro Zoo is. A little plug for the zoo right now. If you haven't been.
Very cool, but put your walking shoes on, right? It is not compact.
You got your steps in yesterday?
For sure, yes, absolutely.
What about interests, hobbies outside of work?
I grew up playing all kinds of sports, soccer, basketball, ran track, basically everything that you could put a ball in front of me, I love to do. that tree has been trimmed a lot as the kids have come around. So I coach their soccer teams and still get out in the backyard and play different kinds of things with them. But truthfully, at this point, I'm basically working and then going home and playing with the kids. So.
Oh, that's great. And coaching the teams, that's always so fun. Do they like you being the coach?
I think so, yes.
For now.
Yeah, for now. We'll see how it goes as they get older, and they'll probably need to transition out of that. But it's been real fun for me and real special, I think, for them and I to have that connection.
Oh yeah, that's the best, and they'll remember that. They'll appreciate that. At some point, they may start to go beyond your skill set, and they say, "All right, I need
hey, my
somebody."
skill set is pretty good. No, I'm just
there
kidding.
you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they will. Yes.
So so the journey to becoming a doctor, that's pretty serious commitment. Did you always know that was what you wanted to be? Was that the dream as a kid?
Absolutely not.
That was not in the picture.
No, it was. My father is a pediatrician and my brother is too now. So it's been in our family for sure. You could probably say maybe I fought it a little bit, although not really. It wasn't an intentional thing. I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was an English major actually at Chapel Hill, and went down to Charleston and waited tables, candidly, for about a year and a half, which was great and super fun, but not a great long-term plan. And my parents were smart enough to put that financial stress on my hands. And so I said, I don't want to do this forever. And as I kind of thought through things, and truthfully didn't know a lot else also, but leaned into medicine and was really glad that I did, right? Great way to feel good about your contribution to the world, right? That's kind of what your job is. It's how you're contributing to everybody. And I felt like that was doing something that could help my family out financially, but also give back to the world in a good way. So it was a good way to bring those two things together.
What a great career. Well, if it had not been medicine, what would it have been?
Oh man, I kind of I liked the idea of teaching. I actually did that for a summer in college. I taught kids who were trying to first through third graders who had struggled with their reading, and we helped educate them throughout the summer to get them ready for the next year. So I have tons of respect for teachers. I think that's one of the most noble professions. I think we should be paying our teachers a ton more. We're on a sidetrack here, but that would be a great thing we could do to our country to help move people along and improve education. But yeah, I love the idea of that too.
I agree. Well, you've got a very strong focus in mental health. Tell us, how did you find yourself in that area of medicine? Why the interest in mental health?
So as I was coming along through med school, you get into your third and fourth year and you're kind of trying to decide what you want to do. The first decision you need to make is, do you want to do surgery or not surgery? And I didn't want to do surgery. And so kind of explored all the possibilities outside of that. And the more and more I got to it, there were two things that really stuck out to me. Number one was there is still so much about the mind and the brain and mental health that we don't know yet. We got a pretty good grasp on how the heart works and what goes on with it. We have a pretty good grasp of how the lungs work. And so the newness of it and the mystery, if you will, I was really drawn to. So I liked that part of it. And then the further along that I got, the more I realized that it was all tied together, and there was no real way for you to have a good mastery of what goes on with the body without understanding what goes on with the brain. There's so many things. We could talk for hours about the mind-body connection. There's a story that I think of that really was a kind of an aha moment. I was on a rotation, and if this gets too medical nerdy, I apologize. But we were on a rotation, and we were taking care of a very sick patient in the intensive care unit. And part of the reason they were there is that they'd been so depressed and they just hadn't eaten at all, and they were incredibly malnourished. Well, we were talking about, what should we do? One of the things we should do is put them on a medicine like Prozac or Zoloft, some common medicines that are called SSRIs. And the way they work is to increase the amount of serotonin that your body's already got in its system. And my attending at the time said, that's great, but we can't do that without giving them a bunch of nutrition. And the reason for that is that serotonin is made from little tiny amino acids, which come from specifically serotonin tryptophan, which is we think of turkey. Oh, there's too much tryptophan. We had too much tryptophan at Thanksgiving. But if you don't eat right and have the appropriate nutrition and nourishment, It doesn't matter what med we give you, you'll never start feeling better because you don't have those building blocks in there. So to me, that was just a really fascinating way to think about, my gosh, all this stuff is so connected. And if you don't have a good grasp on how the mind and body work, you can't treat the heart or the stomach or the lungs without understanding how the brain's influencing that.
I'm actually really glad that you geeked out on us right there. That was because that is what we are struggling with. I think, we talked a little bit before we got started about our industry, the construction industry, predominantly males that don't go to the doctor, and they definitely don't want to talk about mental health.
For sure.
And when we say the words mental health, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what we're talking about. And I think people automatically assume that we're talking about crazy, right? That's not.
Absolutely
it's not that at all. But I also think that people in our industry feel like they should be able to control it. They should be able to fix it.
You're viewed as weak, right?
You're viewed as weak if you can't. But what you just shared with us was really important, and I want to dig into that a little bit more, that sometimes you can't will your way through this.
Yeah, absolutely not.
It's medicine, it's nutrition, it's what's going into your body.
Yeah. The way that I think about a lot of this is I like to use this analogy about a pot of water that sits on a stove. And whether you want to talk about stress or anxiety or your depression or your mood or whatever it may be. So let's use stress for an example. I think of stress as like you have a little bit of water in your pot, and that water level is the amount of stress that you have in your life, okay? Some people are born with a lot of stress, and we know those people that are just kind of naturally anxious, and some people are born with like no stress, and those guys are like surfers down in Costa Rica, right? And good for those guys, right? But like most people that are trying hard and are successful and are, working in our community have some water in their pot. But then what happens is just life, right? So you get two kids, right? And you got two kids getting ready to go to college, and all of a sudden that water level goes up, or, something happens at work and that water level goes up, or you're having difficulties with your spouse and that water level goes up. And these are all just things that happen in life. But before long, a couple of those things start happening and your pot of water starts simmering on the stove. And then if you're already simmering, it doesn't take anything to go from simmering to spilling out over the pot. And that's when you blow up at a loved one, or you have a panic attack, or all of a sudden you feel like your heart's beating too fast on you and you go to the emergency room, right? And so it's not any one thing. It's not that you're too weak. It's just that life happens to all of us. And at some point, for many of us, our pot of water starts to simmer. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just, unfortunately, a natural part of how things work in our world.
What a great explanation. I was actually getting ready to ask you, how would you explain mental health in your own words? And I think that's a great way to put it. It's just sometimes life just bowls over.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's all kinds of things that we can do that aren't necessarily medicine, that are all different types of things to try to get that pot of water back under control, so that if something happens, you go from middle of the pot to a little bit higher instead of simmering to spilling out over the edge, right?
Yep. So we talked about one of the misconceptions being that admitting that you need to focus on mental health people believe that that's a sign of weakness, and that's a misconception. Also, I think that people believe that we talked about trying to will their way through that. What is when you start to boil over and you feel the weight of the world starting to there are things that you can do to fix this, but there are things that you may not be capable of yourself. And so it's really important that you seek help for that, because you have some very real tools that can help someone deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not to say that the attempt or desire to push through is a bad one, right? I mean, a little resolve, a little push through is great. But if you are at a point where it's starting to really take a toll on your life in a negative way, relationships, or your ability to go to work, or you can't sleep, or, this or that, you're not wanting to eat. I mean, that's a real sign that it's time to start reaching out to somebody for help. And again, I absolutely work hard on it, push through, but there comes a point for many people where they need a little extra help. And that is absolutely something that we do, or other providers are happy to help people with.
I don't remember conversations about mental health as I was growing up.
Yeah, correct.
But now you hear it everywhere.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Why is there so much conversation around mental health today? How big is the problem?
I think it's twofold. I think one, people are more comfortable talking about all kinds of different things, right? We're more accepting of other people's differences, and we aren't so quick to make fun of somebody for this or make fun of somebody for something else that's different than who we are. And so it's okay to speak up and say, hey, like my mental health is struggling. The other thing is, I think two phenomenon have happened over the last 15 years that have really raised the mental health temperature, or the mental health pot of water, I guess, if you will. Number one is everybody has a phone and social media. Going back for 50 years, I think it is, maybe 60, if you track mental health and actually suicide levels in teenagers and young adults, it is basically flat until about 2010 to 2012, when everybody got a phone and everybody got social media. Every other intervention that's happened to us, I had it hard when I was a kid. I mean, this is the one tangible thing that we can point to that has made a huge difference. And then the other is COVID, right? I can't tell you how many people struggled with mental health for very obvious reasons. I mean, that was a tough time for everybody. And so between cell phones and social media and the comparison game that happens there, and then COVID, I think that mental health has truly kind of across the board gotten worse for many people over the last 10 to 15 years.
I agree with you. And you know what? It's sometimes you've got kids, I've got kids. We've all as parents said, hey, you know what? It's those dang phones, right? If we didn't
Right.
have the phones, everything would be fine. And they roll their eyes at us and they say, you're just old and you don't get it. But there's, just,
for sure.
We were flatlined on suicide rates until the introduction of the phone.
That's correct.
And then now all of a sudden you're starting to see the numbers skyrocket. These two things, you talk about social, you talk about the phones, you talk about the impact of COVID, that I feel like that was very impactful on our teenagers.
Absolutely.
What about the construction world? What about, because we didn't stop during COVID. We had to live through it. We had a lot of issues, but we kept working. What are the things that you feel like might be impacting this group of listeners?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so don't discount the fact that COVID still played, right? Because
True.
It's not just you, it's your family, it's your children. All of that, all of those things raise your pot of water, right? If your kid, what is the phrase? You're only as happy as your least happy child, right? So your kids are struggling with this. You're a 52-year-old construction worker and your kids are struggling with this, or they're depressed, or they're whatever. It's affecting you. Same thing with your spouse, right? If they're at home dealing with this, you don't understand. I mean, those type of things start to really build up. So I would absolutely not discount the role that those two things have still on even somebody who's out in the field working construction all day long. They're still having to come home and deal with that, which raises their pot of water up even further, right?
It's a great point.
Stress, right? Work stress, demands, financial stress. I think there's been a lot of financial stress in the world over the last few years. All of those things take a toll on everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, and certainly would apply to construction workers too.
That's a great point. Yeah, you're still carrying the weight of all those things.
Yeah.
Whether you had to miss school or not, you've got family members that are dealing with it. You got family members that were sick. You've got a lot of issues, and sometimes you don't realize how much you're carrying.
Oh, absolutely.
What are the signs that you would tell people to be looking for? That if you sat down with me and said, Brandon, are you dealing with mental health issues right now? I may tell you today, no.
Right.
But I may not know either. And there may be some signs that I've just ignored or disregarded. What are some of those signs that we should be paying attention to?
Sure. I mean, some of the things I think we can internally reflect on are like, how's our sleep going? Are we sleeping through the night, or did we used to sleep through the night and all of a sudden now we're waking up 3 or 4 times? Not because we have to pee, but because we, all of a sudden are thinking about something and can't get it off our minds, or we're worried about this. Is your appetite good? Are you still going out and doing things that you enjoy? Do you like going to the game with your buddies? Are you telling them no a little bit more? Those are type of things that we can internally kind of try to assess. How quick is my temper? How short is my fuse with my spouse, with my child, with that? I mean, those are all things. Sometimes it can be hard to reflect on that, though, right? We're just kind of living through it, and we may not realize that we've been, our fuse has been shorter. We've been a little more quick-tempered. But if you start getting it from multiple people, hey, you seem a little bit different, and not, I mean, sure, maybe your spouse says that and you discount that, but if you start hearing it from 3-4 different people, your buddies are like, man, you don't come out anymore. I mean, those are signs that something is different, right? And that's what I would say also, the difference, right? So
Right.
if you're someone that didn't sleep well their whole life, if you're still not sleeping well, okay, no big deal. But maybe you never slept great, and now all you want to do is spend 10 hours in the bed. Well, that's a change. That's a concern. So those would be some kind of tangible things to focus on.
That's got to be such a challenge for you. For you to be able to determine, am I dealing with a physical illness here, or is this more mental?
Yeah.
How do you navigate through that? I guess you just start ruling things out, or?
Yeah, a little. I mean, for sure, a little bit of that, right? I mean, I get this all the time. Chest pain is a classic one. Oh, or my heart's beating fast on me, or whatever. I mean, in the last week, I've probably had this twice, right? Somebody goes to the emergency room because their heart's beating fast on them, and it's, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's on the list, but like, anytime somebody comes in with a medical issue, I'm kind of mentally automatically creating a list of somewhere between 5 and 500 things that could be causing that. And absolutely, mental health things are on that list. I would say for sure, my general approach though is that the last thing you want to do is say, oh man, this is all stress, when it actually is a heart attack, right? I mean, that would be poor form. And so you do start ruling things out. There is also a component though of all of a sudden your EKG is fine, and all of a sudden we do, let's say, a stress test, you go get on the treadmill and run, and that's fine too. Well, that's a lot of reassurance to you, because really why you're worried, because you don't care that your heart rate's beating fast, you're worried that something's wrong with your heart. And so now I've told you that things are okay. That gives you a lot more reassurance. And I also think if it turns out ultimately that it is stress, anxiety, whatever, that it helps people understand that a little bit more. If you come in right now and say, man, my heart feels like it's fluttering on you, and I just say, that sounds like anxiety to me, that feels dismissive, right? So let's say, hey, maybe there's a lot of things on the list. Maybe one of them is stress, anxiety. Let's make sure it's not anything more serious, more dangerous. And then if it's not, maybe we circle back around to that and try to treat that, right? We don't want to dismiss that either. But let's also talk about the other things that it could be. So that's kind of the way that I generally approach that.
Wow. Would you put a weight on physical health over mental health? Would you weigh one over the other, or would you say they're equally as important?
It's a balance, right?
It is.
And again, I would argue that they're so tied together, right? And so you could say, well, gosh, physical health is way more important. Like obesity is a real problem in our country. And it's like, well, okay, but why are people struggling with their weight, right? I mean, a lot of people, it's like, well, food is such a comfort in the immediacy, right? And we're willing to sacrifice long-term problems for short-term joy, right? Yep. So we eat because that makes us happy in the moment. And it's like, well, maybe the reason you're eating is because you're struggling with your mental health, right? I mean, that's one of the first people, somebody comes in and says, hey, I really need to try to lose weight. One of the first questions I ask them is, are you happy? Because if you're not happy, A, it's going to be really hard to lose weight. And B, maybe that's the reason that you have put on some weight, right? And so it's all so tied together. I think they're equally important. And that's kind of my whole approach, right? Is you have to view it all together. Because you can't just say, I'm just going to treat this without thinking about kind of the mental ramifications of it.
But most people don't look at it as equal. Most people have an easier time being able to rationalize, I need to get in the gym.
For sure. I
need to eat better. I need to have more salads. I need to get more sleep. They have a harder time saying this is tied to something else that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that we still are in a world, and like you said, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but particularly among males, right, where we push mental health to the side and are less willing to want to talk about it or whatever. I always tell people, man, I'm so proud of people that come in and say, I'm here because I'm struggling with anxiety or depression or whatever, because that takes so much courage, right? That first step to come in and talk about that is the most, once they do that, we're good, right? Like we can fix it, we can make things better, but we got to get to that point, and that point is a hard one for lots of people.
Yeah, it is hard, and we've fought that. You know, we we have partnered with Tryon,
Yeah.
and we offer direct primary care to our employees at no cost. And we did that because we have such a hard time getting our team members to realize to go to the doctor. And I grew up in construction, and I know it. My dad, my family, they're tough guys, right? They're not going to go. I can get through this. And so it is a challenge, and I don't think it's stereotypical at all. It's the reality of what we're dealing with in the construction industry, and we're trying to overcome that. We've done a lot of the podcast over the last few weeks have been recognizing those that have struggled, but also had the courage to raise their hand and say, I need help.
Awesome.
So we're really working hard to encourage our team members to do just that. That's the first step, right? Being willing to recognize it. Look for these signs that you just laid out. Are you having trouble sleeping? Or is your appetite off? Are you snapping at people that you normally wouldn't snap at? But I'm going to flip it. What can the businesses do to help with this a little bit more? We've been talking to the individual, to the team member, talk to the business owners, because this is new for us. This is, we're not used, business owners aren't used to having to tend to the mental needs of the team members. What should we be doing to better provide for our team?
I would say this type of stuff is step one, right? So making the discussion more acceptable, more commonplace. Hey, we recognize mental health as a problem. So I think it's awesome that you guys are doing this. If it's not talked about, then it's still viewed as unacceptable, right? And it's going to be a slow burn, right? All of a sudden, everybody in the group isn't going to come out on June 1st and say, oh my gosh, mental health, and start talking about it. But the more you address it, the more you talk about it, the more okay people are going to be. I think you have to give people avenues for it. And so I think it's great that you guys have done the direct primary care partnership, right? It removes some of the financial barrier for people. Coming to see a doctor is a financial concern, right? And so eliminating that financial barrier is a big thing. I don't know what you guys do about like time off or whatever, but like making sure that they're not being hit financially by going to see a physician. I think that's a big thing, or anything, right? And then being understanding. I mean, I think it's very important if you have a heart attack, no problem. Hey, man, you're out for the next 2 weeks, no big deal. Like, you're struggling with severe depression, like, okay, you're out for the next 2 weeks, no big deal. Like, same thing, right? These are equally as important, just as big as each other. And I think traditionally we don't view it that way, right?
Agree.
So I think those type of things are really good. I really do think that, like I said, aligning, particularly with primary care, one of the other real barriers that I see in general, but for different populations can be a little more extreme than others, is the lack of comfortability to go talk to a psychiatrist, right? I mean, I've got guys who tell me, like, I would never go see a psychiatrist. I don't even want my car to be parked in the parking lot there, because if a buddy drives by and sees my car there, then I'm embarrassed. Or the last thing I want to do is be in the waiting room and then somebody's wife comes in and sees me there. So primary care is a safe place for that, right? I mean, you're just going to the regular doctor. You can come in and talk to us about your depression, anxiety. You don't have to. You're sitting in the room next to somebody that's there for a physical, or across the way who's there for a strep throat or whatever. And it's no big deal for you to come in. It's a totally safe place, which I think eliminates some of that concern. So I think it's really great that you guys are doing that specifically with primary care.
That's a great point. Yeah. To just the comfort of being able to go in there and not have to worry about someone knowing that you're going to see a psychiatrist.
I mean, it's scary enough to come it's scary enough to go to the doctor in the first place, right? What are they going to find? I don't want to talk to them, et cetera. I totally get all that. But if you're coming in to talk about mental health, it's very scary. So at least not having to feel the judgment of others in the waiting room or your buddy driving by in the park. I mean, that's a direct quote from a patient. I
believe
it's a real thing. Yeah. I believe it too. 100%.
But I also believe what you said earlier, that the needle is beginning to move. People are becoming comfortable with it, and they're becoming more comfortable with having the conversations.
Yep, I agree.
Let me ask you this. Are there specific strategies or coping mechanisms you would recommend to overcoming mental health challenges, especially for people in high-stress jobs like construction world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime somebody comes in, let's say they come in and first visit, they say, hey, I'm really struggling with anxiety, or I feel stress is really building up on me. There are 3 avenues that we talk to people about trying to go down to try to make things better. And the first that I always talk about is self-care, right? So this doesn't involve me. You don't have to come see me. You don't ever have to come back. You start doing all this stuff. You can do it on your own. It's totally free. The first part of that is cardiovascular exercise. I think even going for walks, and again, I get it. I always tell people, listen, I'm trying to meet you where you want to be met. So if you look at me when I say that and you're like, when am I supposed to do that? Like, work my tail off and then I go home and take care of 3 kids and then I go to bed because I'm tired. Like, okay, that's fine. Like, maybe this isn't something that we can do, but I'm going to give you 12 things that we can talk about. And if you can latch onto like 1 or 2 of them, then maybe some of this can snowball in the right direction.
Right.
Because we think about things snowballing in the wrong direction. Like, I'm stressed and now we're dealing with finances and then I don't want to do anything. And then I start snapping at my wife and now my things are going bad with that. And it builds on itself, but it also builds in the right way too, right? So like now I am starting to exercise and that makes me feel a little bit better. My endorphins are going, it burns off some of the stress. And so I keep using snapping at your wife, but that's just I hear this all the time. I get, my fuse is a lot shorter. So now my fuse is longer. And so it makes that things can snowball in the right way too. So sorry, I'll circle back. So cardiovascular exercise, I think, is a great one. It does burn off some stress, gives us some endorphins, which are kind of our natural chemical to help make us feel better. So that's a really good one. Making sure you're sleeping well, right? Making sure you're eating well. Your body will feel better if you're treating it better. So if you're only getting 5 hours of sleep, you're going to be super exhausted next day and you're not going to feel well. Making sure you're eating healthy stuff. If you're at, I don't want to throw any specific brands under the bus, but if you're
Don't say Chick-fil-A. Don't do it.
If you're at fast food every day and you're not eating healthy, you're not going to feel as well. I mean, it's just true. And again, if you're like, man, I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A, then that's fine. Do that, but maybe try to pick up a few of the other things.
Yeah.
I always talk to people about, and this sounds to some people a little like new age and hokey, but I do think that meditation can be incredibly helpful. There's a app that we use called the Calm app, CALM. It's just, an app you can buy on your phone, but, listen, I'm not savvy enough to like go in a dark room quietly and just, I would be so distracted if I tried to meditate. Right. But there's like a lady on there that talks you through these 10-minute things and she's kind of guiding you through it. And man, I certainly don't admit to doing it regularly, but during times where I've had a lot of stress, like I'll do that for a couple of weeks and it's like, man, okay, I feel a little bit better after that 10 minutes. And again, you don't need to move the needle all the way with one thing, but every little step makes a big difference. So those are some of the like self-care things that I always talk to people
And
about.
I don't want to break your rhythm right now because I want to get the rest of this because you're giving us some really good stuff. But I do want you to just go a little deeper on this meditation.
Oh, sure.
Because I agree with you. I think people hear that and they think, all right, some yoga class and I'm doing chants and let's get the That's not what you're talking about. And you're not talking about a long period of time. It could be 5 minutes.
Yes, correct. Yeah. I mean, the one that I've done is like a 10-minute daily meditation thing. I mean, and I don't do it daily, but in fact, I haven't done it in probably 6 months because things have been okay. But like 6 months ago, there was a lot of stress. So like, yeah, for a couple of weeks at night, and you can do it whenever, man. 10 minutes, it can be like first thing that you wake up, it can be on your lunch break. Like, guys, I'm going to go sit in the car for a minute and you just like pop that thing on your phone. It can be, at night, when my wife's it's not my night to put the kids down. I have 10 minutes. Okay. So I do it then. Like it really only, and there are even shorter ones, right? But, just a little bit of time where no one is talking to you, where you're able to kind of like calm your thoughts, calm your brain. It's amazing how quickly it can be helpful.
I am guilty of dismissing the importance of that. And I'm to go back to your analogy in the beginning, you've got this pot of water. It's throughout the day, you're adding things to it. It's getting hotter and hotter. You're starting to boil over. And meditation is that 5 minutes where you cut the heat down for just a little bit and bring it back down.
Absolutely.
And then afterwards, it may start to rise and you can do it again. But it's bringing that stress level back down. Just with...
it's really just like breathing. Yeah. It's not, there is, I'm sure, more nuance to that, but it's really just like, hey, quit thinking about all the mess going on in your life and just focus on your breathing. And it's not even really anything. The whole point is just so you're not thinking about all the other stuff. And it really can make a big difference. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for doing that. For those of us that are sitting there listening to him talk about meditation and think, I'm not doing that. He's just talking about breathing. Just get control of your breathing.
It's not like a super hooey or whatever you want to call it. It's just, it's a helpful tool. Yeah.
All right. Self-care, exercise, sleep, nutrition, meditation.
Yeah, those are all things that I would put under the self-care thing. So again, if you came in to ask me, you said, man, I'm struggling with some stress, anxiety, whatever, that's kind of the first step, because people like to have tools that they can use on their own, right? And you should be able to, and you can do those things every day, right? You don't need to come talk to me about that. Number two is, for some people, like having somebody to talk to is incredibly helpful. You can call it a therapist or whatever, and there's several different versions of that, but really it's just having somebody to talk to. And to me, the really nice part of that is that you don't know that person other than in that room, right? So no matter who you interact with in your life, you're going to hold something back about what you could talk to them. You're never going to tell them the 100% truth, because it's going to be something about them, right? Or you're embarrassed. Like if it's your spouse, you may not want to tell her because it's about her, or you may not want to tell her because you don't want her to have to worry about what you're having to worry about, right? So you're going to keep that inside, right? If it's a buddy, you may be embarrassed to tell your buddy that you're dealing with it or whatever, so you don't get into it. If it's your parent, you may not, heck, sometimes it may be about your parent, right? Mom, dad are struggling with their health, and God, that's really stressing me out, and you don't want it to, so like, it's very helpful to have someone that you're not going to go have a beer with later, that you're not going to come home and talk to, that you don't have to catch up on the phone with twice a week. You can say whatever you want, because you will not see that person outside of the confines of that room. And that's very freeing. And I think that's the important part to me about therapy, is that you can do that. It also, I think, helps you compartmentalize a little bit too. There's this nice byproduct of, like something happens to you on Tuesday afternoon and you're getting all stressed about it. Well, you can think, all right, man, at Thursday at 4, I'm going to go talk to my person about this, and I'm going to get it off my chest. And so I'll worry about it then. And then it helps you kind of put it to the side at that moment, right? Because there's a time already scheduled in your week where you're going to go get
to deal with that.
So you don't have to mess with it then. So I think there's some benefit to that too. And then the third thing that I talk to people about is yes, there are medications that can be very helpful with this type of stuff, right? And again, just whether it's therapy or medication or meditation or trying to get good sleep, if I tell you that that's a helpful tool and you're like, that's not for me, man, then okay, cool, right? Like, again, let's give you 15 options and try to latch on to one or two, and we can see what works. And if they do, great. And if not, you want to pivot to something else, that's fine. But medication is certainly one. And I totally understand. I get a lot of pushback and resistance. I don't want to take some whatever. But if you need it, it is incredibly helpful. And I think a lot of people's concern about medication is, I don't want to take something that makes me feel different than who I am, right? I don't want to take something that makes me feel like a different person. But inevitably what people say is that they feel actually much more like themselves, right? They are like themselves without all the stress. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't turn you into anything different. It just helps you function without all the stress, the anxiety, the depression, whatever it may be, and truly really allows you to feel much more like yourself. So I think that's an incredibly helpful tool. And again, I have people that come in and are like, man, I don't have time to exercise. Can I not just take a pill every morning? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I
was going to ask you if people come in and say, forget steps 1 and 2, just give me the pill.
100%. I mean, listen, the advantages of medication are that it's cheap and it takes no time, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, the medications cost like $2 these days. So like maybe at most probably. So like, sweet, I paid $2 for a whole month worth of this thing, and it takes me literally 2 seconds to throw it in my mouth. Like, this is awesome. But there's also still lots of people that don't like the idea of taking medicine or putting something else in their body, and I appreciate that as well.
Yeah. I love that you go through those steps first, and that's your approach to it. Let's work on self. And then let's work on you talking about what's going on. And then if we can't do it with that, then we'll get to the medication.
But at the same time, if you don't want to go talk to somebody, me like forcing you to go do that is a terrible plan, right?
Right.
So I'm happy I present them in that order intentionally, but like if you want to go to step 3, or if you want to do all 3 or 2 and 3 or whatever, it doesn't matter to me, man. We're just here to try to get you to help.
Yeah, I think that's great. What's one piece of advice that you would leave our listeners with regarding mental health? Think about you talking to the dirt world right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would just say don't don't discount it, right? Don't push it to the side. I think it is extremely important, and I think you'd be amazed at how big of an impact it has in so many aspects of your life. If you are struggling in any way with it, like, come talk to, and I would suggest, I mean, I'm obviously biased because I'm a primary care doctor, but like, come talk to your primary care doctor. It is the safest place in the world to do that. We all, I mean, man, not just me. I think, the data for primary care is something like 20 to 30% of our visits are mental health related. I mean, we all take care of this all day long. We are all very comfortable with it. We are happy to meet you where you want to be met. And I think, and yes, I think the doctors at Tryon are great and probably, in my opinion, the best, of course. I'm biased, but I mean, like, go see a primary care doctor wherever, right? Like, if you already have one, go see them there, talk to them about it. Don't just let this, I mean, I tell people this all the time, like, don't come back, like, somebody will be like, I'm struggling a little bit. And I'm like, okay, don't come back in a whole year and not have to, like, if things get better, great. But man, don't just sit on this. Like, there are so many things that and I could probably talk for hours about other things that we can do. I mean, there's so much that you can do to try to help make things better. So don't just push through. Yes. Like we said at the beginning, like, yes, try hard, push through. But like, if you've been doing that and it's not working, like, it is not a sign of weakness. I tell people it is a sign of strength, right? Like, man, good for you. You have the strength to come in and ask for help to get something fixed. Like, that is a real sign of strength, versus I'm just going to be quiet about it because I'm embarrassed to come in and say something.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping we accomplish over the next few weeks is that we get people to at least realize there is nothing to be embarrassed about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I struggle with it myself. I'm taking medicine, but it's because I exercise every day. I eat the best I can, and I still am not wired to be able to deal with the stress that life is bringing right now.
Everybody has at various seasons in our life, we all have times where we are way more stressed out than others. I mean, that is just the natural flow of life. And for many, many, many people, at some point, it just gets to a point where it's really starting to affect you in some negative ways. And it doesn't mean you have to end up on medicine or you have to see a therapist or you have to meditate or whatever. But like, if you're not comfortable with how to figure out how to do it, then come ask for some help and people can guide you in the right way.
Yeah. But you're not alone.
Absolutely not.
There's a lot of people out there that are dealing with it, and there's a lot of resources out there for people that are dealing with it. Again, I keep going back to some of the elements that you said have caused it and made it such a big issue today. Like, we're not hardwired to be able to deal with that amount of stress.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I think we're in a new day, and unfortunately our kids are having to deal with it a lot worse than we did, but there are tools, there are resources, and it's okay to not be okay.
Well, again, kudos to you guys for doing this. I think it's an awesome thing. I think it's really good to begin to initiate the conversation and just make it comfortable for people to talk about, right? So I think it's really awesome.
Well, thank you for coming in and giving us a totally different perspective on this. This was great, and we needed this. We're gonna blast this out over the company, but also on our podcast sites and to the dirt world, and hopefully someone's listening to this and they have the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to go talk to someone.
Yeah, well, that would be great.
Thank you for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for digging in with us on this episode of Give Us the Dirt, powered by HGC. If you liked what you heard, make sure you leave us a rating and a review, and subscribe now on our Apple, Spotify, or YouTube channels so you never miss an episode. To share feedback or suggest our next guest, visit our website at giveusthedirtpodcast.com.